Ladies and gentlemen, Pauline Murray. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Pauline Murray. I've been an accountant now in Gawler for over 40 years. Prior to that, I had a life as a real estate agent, and prior to that, I worked in a supermarket and in milk rounds. So it's been a varied area. I lived in the country, lived in the city, yeah, that helps me be the best accountant I possibly can. And I am the accidental accountant. How that came about, of course, is a story for another day. At the end of the day, if you think about accounting, it's boring, it's scary, it's something you don't want to talk about, it's all of those things. But at the end of the day, accounting is exciting. I find accounting exciting. They'll never make a TV program about us. Why? Because we have so many secrets to everybody's life. The beauty of accounting is you can make a difference. Now, if you think about even tonight, Brian started off with getting a treasurer. Why didn't everyone race up and say, I want to be treasurer? Oh, it sounds too hard. No, by being treasurer, you can make a difference in your organisation. That's what I do every day to people's lives. And that's what we as accountants do. We change the world. What I'm going to do tonight is to start off with where accounting started in Gawler. And we have to remember that Gawler was the largest commercial town in South Australia in its day. Of course, if you think about it, we'll have a look at some of those in a moment. Some of the factories that were here, the number of workers that were here, the amount of product that was produced, the only way that that stuff was ever going to be transported was with logistics, we call it now, and that day it was just transport. Someone had to drive what was actually produced, and the accountant worked out if there was a profit. They worked out how much they needed to make a particular product, they worked out what materials were required, and they made the profit. That's where accounting started. Now, accountants in those days were put in a little back room and considered to be the just little people that were promoted from the floor in order to count the numbers. Nowadays, accountants are looked upon, and we'll talk about some of the different types of accounting now, which I think people are not really aware of, and how accounting has changed. So let's have a look, Ian. I have to thank Ian. He's done a lot of work with some of the... Would you bring... I'm going this way?
No, back where you were. Yep.
Okay. I think if you think back yourselves at some of these, you'll remember they're quite large factories. This is James Martin, remembering the effect he had on the town, just to move forward. Here we go, that's the manufacturing. If you think about what Gawler was like when all of these factories were up and running, they had to be profitable. And I think we can just go through those as we go. The May Brothers. I just find it amazing that a lot of this existed in Gawler. It's just incredible. Where did we go wrong? The Butter Factory. Time of Fashions. It is interesting to note, you might just state, it is interesting to note that I had the opportunity to speak to 3 of the older accountants who were in Gawler, and one of them came as a result of Time of Fashions. The other is part of May, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, and of course the Butter Factory also spawned the beginnings of the accounting profession in Gawler. Why? Because when these factories started to close down, of course, you had all those people looking, all these people without employment, and of course the only job they knew was accounting, and that's how that started. That's Timer, and it's a big factory. Looks like some of the Chinese ones we have now, which is a bit sad. The Eagle Foundry. Are these all going through your mind as to how big these organisations were? The amount of money that needed to be generated to keep them moving, and that's where accounting began. So we can just whip through those. Forgot about the Gawler Egg Factory, of course, that was there. How are we going? All this bringing back memories?
That was a bit before my time. Yeah, following them.
And think about the accountant in the back room making this all happen, working out where the money is going to go. Can you imagine how busy Gawler was? Not only did you have the buildings that housed the workers, who were, the accountants looked after them, we then had the people who then needed to lodge taxation returns even back in those days. So someone had to do that as well. Goodness, there were a lot, weren't there? That's them? Okay, so how do we do this? I think you've got a fantastic bean counter where it all started, haven't you, on your calculator list? We have. If you think about it, what do you always think with accountants? You're thinking of them being as bean counters. Very unfair in today's world, I might tell you. And when I mentioned the household I was coming to speak on accounting for 40 minutes, he laughed. Because, of course, he's lived with an accountant and has no interest in accounting, so he thought it was quite funny. So here we are. This is where we start, as a bean counter. If you have a look now as to the fact of the sorts of calculators that were there, the time that was spent, think now of the computers, the digital age, the internet, and the way in which accounting has changed. I just think it's amazing how big they were, and someone had to even work these out. Quite incredible, isn't it? Do you remember seeing some of these? And then the handheld ones. What do they say? We can now hold more in our hand than the first computers could hold in a computer's the size of a room. So it's really quite amazing how it's come together. It's fantastic. Now the reason on your watch, it's a bit like Dick Tracy stuff. Fantastic. I brought show and tell. I started counting using this. You know what, today I still actually use one of these. Why? Because it prints out. Can't make mistakes other than the operator, and at all times you can see what's happening. The reality is, of course, is that what was this one here? You had this one. This was a handheld one. So that's a realistic. And you think about how that big is in the day, you've got phones which are smaller than that now. I had the occasion to speak to, as I say, other accountants who'd been here in Gawler. You will recall most recently Keith Jacobs in Jacob Street. Keith he's just retired, and he came from the background of the manufacturing of Gawler. Higgins, he also came from the background of time of fashions, turned to accounting, and had an office in the old Derek Such building, and was subsequently burnt out from there. He tells me that he was actually, which he'd like you to know, is he'd like you to know that he's one of the top students in South Australia in his day. So that was very good. I thought that was fantastic. I spoke also to Barry Trelaud briefly, who was also an accountant in Gawler. And in those days it was, the accountant. It was a person who you not only respected, you felt comfortable with, but at the same time it was a scary person who you had to go and see. The way in which the work was in the day, effectively, it wasn't, even today what we have is a whole range of different types of accounting. You cannot be all things to all people. So the accountants that came out of the manufacturing area went straight into doing what they did best, doing manufacturing accounting, cost accounting, where they worked out how much items were. The government then worked out that they weren't getting enough money from we as Australians. So then they decided to introduce the tax system, sales tax, They started out with moving on as the years went by. Of course, we introduced GST. Income tax became more complex. The structures under which you're able to operate a business changed. The way in which people invested changed. All of this needed to be brought together for two reasons. The banks wanted their share, the government wanted their share, but most importantly, the world wanted to move forward, grow wealth, and come to the stage where we are at the moment. Now, whether that's good or bad, of course, that's open to debate. That's effectively where accounting came from and where we're looking to go. We also were very fortunate here in Gawler. We had a fantastic TAFE college, which has gone from being that to that to that to nothing. And we had a very, very good accounting area there, and at one stage it was the leading accounting TAFE in the state, with some of the top marks and some of the founders of some of the large firms in Adelaide coming out of the TAFE system. So that was really quite something for Gawler to hang their hat on. No longer do we have the teaching here in Gawler, but of course most of accounting now is done online. And there's still, of course, obviously the university degrees that are happening. What I thought I'd do is to, now, have you got that list of the different types of accounting? If you look around Gawler at the moment and you Google accountants in Gawler, you'll find there's a myriad of accountants. For a number of reasons. Firstly, the population has grown in Gawler. The complexity of the accounting as a whole has grown, and specialties have grown as well. Accounting, all you can think of, what do you think of when you think about an accountant?
Checkbook.
Sorry?
Your checkbook.
A forensic accounting is a growing area. What forensic accounting is, and for those of you that watch those programs on television where all of a sudden money's missing or whatever, the forensic accountant goes in, unlike auditing where we tend to look at the paperwork that's there, see if it matches up and agree with the person. Forensic accountants go through that paperwork, pulling each number from the page literally to get an answer. And you'll see all those court cases that happen where money laundering, all of that happens. That's as a result of the forensic accounting. Government accountants, we have a thought, I think they work hard. And if any of you are a government accountant, you're most welcome to come and give us a bit of an idea of what you're doing. We need them, but they could do things a bit better, I think. Tax accounting, the hand. You have auditing and assurance services. A lot of that comes through from the financial industry and also insurance, much of that. Budgetary accounting, if you think about the factories and whatnot, in order to produce the product they do, they need to work out how much needs to be made on each widget, for want of a better word, in order to make a profit. Financial accounting, managerial accounting, cost accounting. There is a special area of non-profit accounting, which is all of the organisations to whom we donate. They have their own special set of rules. Special set of standards for all of our different types of accounting. We have accounting education, which is also a whole academic level that is kept by accounting. And then we have general information that's given by accountants. We all have a specialty. I've chosen public accounting, auditing and financial planning. I'm in trouble. And if you have a talk to each of them, you have superannuation accountants. All types of accountants are around now, so that you need to be looking at your accountant and asking a question as to what their specialties are. I think it's great. I have no issues with any of that. Let's have a look at some of the types of auditors. Is that the other one? Did you know there was all this different types of accounting?
No.
No? I'll make you do a show of hands if you don't all nod your heads or do something.
No.
Good, thank you. Okay. Auditing, going concerns, that where people effectively, they just have internal audits which operate to make sure that everything is operating as it should. Internals control, a little bit different. Those people look at each transaction, how things can happen to make an answer come out at the end. Engagement, quality review, there's a whole industry now that's come together with quality control. I like professional scepticism. I don't actually know what that is. I haven't Googled, I haven't looked at it. Has anyone got any suggestions? It is about accounting, but you can talk, we are human. Okay, parties and amendments. This is came out of an American one, but we have a whole heap of standards that relate to every area of auditing and every area of accounting. How do we keep up? It's really easy if you're actually doing every day the work. It's like every work that you've ever had. You just don't notice you're updating, you're just reading and continually growing what you're doing. That's the bones of it. Why do I like accounting? Because I get to talk to people and find out what's happening in their lives. Have you ever gone to see your accountant and wondered, I'm not sure whether I should tell them this, or gone and seen the bank manager and wonder whether you should be telling them that? Let me tell you that we not only are accountants, but we're also sometimes the social worker that helps you through life. We also have times when we have husband and wife split up. We can either get caught in the crossfire or we split the file and we make sure they don't meet at the door. Otherwise that is very, very awkward. I had a guy the other day actually who wanted to claim his wage runner as a tax deduction for the business. Not the first time I've heard it. Why? Because he employed people and he needed the wave runner so they could go out, have some R&R on weekends, make sure that they had team building. That made sense to him. We all wear high heels. I'm glad you don't, Brian, but women wear high heels. It's important to have high heels in certain jobs. Why can't we claim them? I like the truck drivers who have to have their doonas and their quilts. The tax office doesn't agree with that, because they maintain that they can sleep on just a Woolies blanket, a Kmart pillow. That should be the end of it. TVs, people live away from home. You think about it, those of you that have gone away from home, you've had accommodation, you've had all that sort of thing, agree? Have you ever tried to claim it on your taxation? You should have, because many try. Why? Because if you're living away from home, we have a guy at the moment who lives next door to his wife. Why? Because they can't get along. And secondly, it means he wants to be able to have space to get up in the mornings in order to not disturb the family. Therefore, he should have a tax deduction for his house and every other little food, everything. They're the sorts of things that we deal with every day. We've also got the situation where we know that there's a difficulty within the family. Where do we cross that line? And that's part of that process in making sure that we pull back from that line. What's hard is, and I think we're our worst enemy, the accounting profession. If you think about every accountant that you have ever met, you have a vision that you don't wear red. That's why we're all red tonight. Because we're supposed to blend into the background. If you think about the way accounting works now, is something that now the students that are studying at the universities, not only are they doing accounting, they need to have people skills. They need to be able to do public relations. They need to have emotional intelligence. They need to have human resource abilities. They need to be able to talk. And if you think of the southern generation now, where everything's on the screen, what happens then is that they have to learn to talk. So you can see how it's gone from the back room of the bean counter. You just fed them food through the little latches and said, here, you'll be right, you'll be right. And if the accountant said anything, then it was just the accountants. However, that's the one thing that is kept going through life. You always blame your accountant. You do, don't you? No? See the accountant or the bank manager, one of the two, you've got to blame someone. And at the end of the day, we make that happen because even today, just blame the accountant. And that's the way that it works. We can only be as good as people let us be, which means that you either produce these huge, big plastic boxes you buy at cheap as chips, with all the paperwork in there and expect us to come up with an answer in 2 days. I don't think I'm making any money. Well, do you think? You know, it's just one of those things. It's about record keeping. If you think about record keeping, once upon a time you sat down with your calculator, you sat down with your receipts, you did the whole bit. Accounting now is scanning in receipts. It's pushing a couple of buttons and it comes up. Our role now has moved from being what you would traditionally call a bean counter to a person that now effectively is your silent partner in your life, making sure that you have got your finances right and you've got your structures right. I gave a presentation one year, I remember, to a group of Year 12s at Millicent High School. I thought I'll tell them how to lodge tax returns, how to do budgets, what they should do with credit cards. Oh, I really put a lot of work into it. One kid stands up and the only question this kid could come up with was, does the Governor-General pay tax? It's sad because that generation now would probably be in their 20s or their 30s with the highest credit card debt in history and the highest unpaid phone bills in history. So it's one of those things. And it's still important to know that finance and how to look after your finances is not talked about generally in the household. Got no idea why. It is not talked about in schools, and kids are really not shown how to handle their money, which is a little sad. And if you think about your own situation, finances seem to be something that you want to keep very, very private. It's important that it is, but at the same time, the only way you learn is by talking to people and getting answers to things. Accounting, I guess, from my point of view, and if you think about it, when you sit down with your accountant, whether it be for auditing, whether you look at costing, depending on whatever you require an accountant for, when you sit down, you like to go away with a peace of mind to know exactly where you are, what the plan is, and what the outcome is. Agree? Unfortunately, we can't do that for you. We can push you out the door, go and do this. Invariably, you're back 2 days later. I must do that. Right, and it's not working. Have you done this? No, I haven't done that. So it just gives you a little bit of an indication of the sorts of things. Sometimes you can be your own worst enemy. I think if they ever made an accountant's serial on television, I think they ought to do it about what we actually do on a day-to-day basis. We arrive, we have coffee, we see people, we talk around the, as I say, around the water fountain. No, we don't. We sit down and look after your affairs. What would you like to ask an accountant? Don't all rush me.
Is it claimable?
Is it claimable? And it's funny because every time you talk to people, and it doesn't matter whether if it's accounting, is it claimable, right? That's the first question. You ask a person for details of what's been happening during the year. I want to claim this. Yeah, but you've had this income. We need to start here and then we'll do some deducting. Then we'll talk about whether it's claimable. If it's a cost accountant, invariably Why is it going to cost that much? Well, because it does cost that much, and that's a part of that process. So again, I take the view that accountants run the world, and that's why we are now looking at CEOs of the large companies now have not only degrees in accounting, but they also have degrees in soft people skills. The kids that are coming out of the degrees now are now asking, the employers are asking for the soft skills, and that's a part of the process. The big five, 4 or 5, depends on what you want to call them, accounting firms in the country are all effectively worldwide, and many accounting students are picked up within their second year of their degrees to join the companies with a view that they will work a 40-hour week, but they are expected to work almost an 80-hour week. So it makes it very, very difficult to keep up the supply of accountants because, of course, they get burnt out to an extent. The public accounting profession, the average age of public accountants and tax agents is 56 years of age, which is a little bit sad, but that's just the way of the world. If you look at the entry level for students now at TAFE, unfortunately the courses now are getting around the $20,000 to $25,000 mark. You marry that with a hairdresser, it's still costing $15,000 or $16,000. So you can see if you've got to find $20,000 to go through a TAFE course, there is a slow progression way. If you go to the eastern states, you'll find that probably 90% of accountants now are of Asian descent, which is, we all need to learn Mandarin, and we all need to learn, there's a couple of other Chinese dialects, not real good at those. All right, or we have to speak Donald Trump, one of the two. I actually have a lot of time for Donald Trump. I mean, he sacks a lot of people, but he has, if you think about it, our dollar is 80 cents at the moment. Their level of unemployment is down over there. Whether we like the man or not, he seems to be out of that political correctness. Personal view. Okay, I haven't heard much from anyone in the audience. Please.
What's the basic litmus test for a tax deduction?
Sorry?
What's the basic litmus test for a tax deduction?
If we could get a straight answer out of the tax office, that would be good. What we have is a system of substantiation. So what happens when you sign your taxation return, you sign to say that you have the receipts for everything you've claimed. What can you claim? Or we can use as a whole range of cases in order to do that. But the problem with that is that we always need to push the boundaries to make it happen. You see, we are interesting people, we're all the time pushing the boundaries. And we have a system of rulings if we really want to ask the tax office about something specific. And we're able to submit all the facts to them, and then we can find out then whether it's deductible. The Act provides for, it needs to be necessary for the work that you do. So by definition, each of you has a job. Each of you has different, what you believe your job needs to do. Even if you both did the same job, you will do things differently. So the question you ask, which is, it's like saying the tax office is logical. It was never meant to be logical. So there's no real answer to that question, unfortunately. But you asked a question, thank you. Any others? Yep.
With the advent of modern superfast computers and massive data storage and all the government instrumentality sharing data,
Yes.
do you think there's any possibility that the average person submitting a tax return has any open hell of making a claim that won't be bounced?
That's what accountants do. We take you through that myriad. If you, there's some we cannot help, but one would argue that yes, it gives us a challenge as to what they've got. We work within the legislation, and our challenge is to make it work to the best for the circumstance that we're presented with, and that's a part of that process. So, yeah.
Budget night every year, does that cause a worry? Like you've got people set up on a certain way to get the best out of their tax system every you get a budget in and something changes. It's a hard job for you to go through and work out what you have to do with all the different companies.
Effectively, which is coming back to the point, the budget, it amazes me how people don't just have budget parties, you know, barbecues and all of that. It doesn't seem to happen for some reason or other, but that's just the way it is. The quick one the next morning, you look in the paper just to see how it affects different people. Accountants have a specialty in what they do, whether they're, and coming from the whole realm of them, the budget covers all areas. And from that point of view, you've got a rough idea of what areas are going to affect you, and it just adds to the knowledge you've already got. So you basically cut it off what you had before, and you move forward to the next. We never look backwards, we can't. And that's a fact of life.
Has the government done anything about requiring various financial institutions to provide an end of year, end of June, details relative to before the end of September or into October?
There's a couple of answers to that question. Always you see how nothing's standard. The answer to the question is, which was asked about what happens with the different institutions. We have now what we have is a pre-fill from the ATO, which is interesting. It is a tool, and when we talk about the tax office, to be a tool is pretty good. So what happens with this tool, it has information on it, which we can use, gives us details of the bank interest which is reported, any person they might have worked with, if they're self-employed, a whole range of things, if they've sold a property, they've sold shares, they've got employee shares, all of these different things, right? However, if you rely on this tool from the tax office, you will get it wrong and you'll be fined. So the answer to the question is, the tax office are continually asking the organisations, but of course at the end of the day, like all government departments, there's always those outside who will test it to the nth degree. So just out of pure stupidity, I would say that a lot of the companies are not reporting because the tax office says so. But most now, instead of reporting in October or whatever, most of those now around September something, they've brought them forward a bit. That's just computerisation at the same time. Yeah.
Is there a justification for accountants to be totally au fait with all of the superannuation rules? Or is that something where there should be a definitive split between the two areas?
Right, Brian asked a question about superannuation. Superannuation has always been an area that is very important because, of course, as you get to later in life, you're looking to rely upon that income. What happened is that accountants, by their very nature, were giving advice on financial planning, were giving advice on superannuation, a whole range of things. What they did was to change the legislation to say that accountants need now to be licensed as either a financial planner in their own right or to join one of the larger organisations, superannuations, or one of the larger organisations that provide financial planning. What that's meant now is that you have specialty accounting firms now that do primarily accounting for superannuation. Also, as you'd be aware, superannuation now has to have the auditing done on a regular basis, and also the actuaries have to work as well. So the short answer to the question, it is a specialised field. And what we as accountants do, we have a level that we deal with, and then we then farm out what goes above a particular level. So it works out quite well. So specialty is one of those things. It's a matter of having that network of people to help out, and you'll find that even the accountants in Gawler, we all have specialties, and we do tend to interact with each other in different areas. Any other queries? Yep.
Yeah, going back in history
Yep.
to the 170 years ago, does somebody like yourself have sufficient historical record to be able to rate these heroes of Gawler like James Martin and Fred May and Duffield and so forth in relation to their handling and understanding of money?
I love that
That's
question.
it.
I don't know. I could dream something up, but I don't know. At the end of the day, it's an interesting question, and I've never actually seen a comparison of the past and present. In our lifetime, of course, with the advent of digital, we have that ability of comparison, and that's a great thing. But I actually have a talk to Colin Higgins, who's very much loves his accounting as well, even though he's retired, and see what he comes up with. So watch this space. Thank you. Yep.
You used the term growing wealth. Is that just a fancy way of saying getting rich?
No. Wealth means different things to different people. Just paying the bills sometimes is being rich.
I hear it being used on television by the financial people and it goes over my head. So what's growing wealth mean?
I think it's a catchphrase to make people feel as though it's something that is, oh, I'm growing wealth, I need to find out about it. So it's a catchphrase to bring it forward. That's what it actually is. And wealth, if you think about the next generation, wealth is in front of them, all of the movie stars, all of those. They're wealthy, they're told they're wealthy. How can I get like that? Well, I need to grow my wealth. But at the end of the day, I think wealth means different things to different people. But it's a catchphrase. And, of course, if you think about all the scammers we have online now, I forget what it was, we had every day in our office we have no less than about 10 people who will ring who have been run by scammers. Fortunately, in our office, what our people will do generally, our clients will do is they'll usually have the scammer on one phone and they'll ring us, or they'll hang up and ring us and find out. So we find that helps out, and I think most accountants are all in the same boat. I forget, I reckon there's 3,000 to 5,000 different types of scams that are currently out there at the moment since the 1st of July regarding taxation. And that's a part of that process. And you've also got those who are scamming, selling rental properties, promising growth of wealth. Today I had a guy who dealt with a company overseas who he was told he'd made all these profits and things. He's been going on and on and on about this for ages, and of course I've been telling him all the time about what's happening. And to be fair, he has lost $60,000, but one would have to ask, did he not think when he's going to get 30% return on your money? And that also is part of that process. Again, there's not a direct answer. Does that answer your question? Or have I confused you?
It's just the fact that it's used, and I can't see any difference between growing wealth and getting rich, as long as you talk about money, really. But as you say, wealth and richness can mean different things.
To different people, yeah. And that's a part of that process. It's sad, though, when people are preyed upon, and particularly they go to seminars where they buy rental properties, they do a whole range of things, and with a view that they're going to be rich in terms way beyond they can retire when they're 40, they can go and travel the world and do whatever they like. You as mature age people know it doesn't happen overnight, it takes many, many years to achieve. Yeah.
I was always told that if you're looking at an investment which is 2% greater than the going rate, once you exceed that, you're starting to get into a risk area which is greater than perhaps what you're capable of
absorbing. And I don't think that's changed. I think that's still part of the process.
Yeah.
It's just that common sense has gone out the window, and of course with finance have relatively easier, except for the last 6 months where the banks have started to close up because of regulations. Money's been pretty easy to get, so of course people get a little bit desperate if they lose their job or circumstance changes. But at the end of the day, it's asking questions, and we as accountants have our clients doing nothing else is to ask questions, and that's really what it's all about. It's like going to the doctor now. I don't go very often because I figure they might find something wrong with me. I really don't want to know. So I'd sooner just drop dead. So what happens is when I go to the doctor now, I have this list. Because you know how they ask you those stupid questions? You know he's got 10 minutes to get you in and out. He really doesn't want to know. Then he reaches for the prescription pad. How many of us got those prescriptions in the cupboard? You really knew you didn't want it and you just wanted an answer. I suggest that the accountant too, I say to my clients, please, if you've got thoughts, write them down. Let's have an information exchange, and that needs to happen. And if we do nothing to the next generation, we need to also educate them to do that as well. Yeah.
This is a silly one, I'm sorry. What's your most unusual client's occupation? You can ignore it if you'd rather.
I guess there's a couple of things. I guess it depends on what you're unusual. I think at the end of the day, I don't have an unusual occupation. I have occupations because even illegal occupations effectively have tax paid on them. So I have some very lovely people in some very unusual occupations who are just the most loveliest people alive. But of course they have occupations that perhaps we would look down upon, but they have a service to the community. So, and that's a really good thing. So, but other than that, that's all.
Thank you.
That was diplomatic, wasn't it? Yeah, that was diplomatic, wasn't it? Yeah.
Over the last 20 years, have you noticed a disparity between those fairly well off and those who are really, really struggling? It's fairly commonplace in the media in the last 6 months about the fact that there is a gap of, you know, those who've got decent money and those who are really, really struggling. Are you finding that is growing, that gap?
I think our expectations of what we want to achieve has changed. If you earn $30,000 and you live to your $30,000 income, then you will grow wealth in the same way as a person who earns $250,000. Neither one has any more money on a day-to-day basis because you live to your income. If you think about a person on $30,000 a year having a barbecue, they go down the local butcher shop and grab the sausages and the chops and cook it up, agree? If you've got a person on 250, 300 grand a year, they're not going to do that, they're going to get in the caterers to do the barbecue. So it's a matter of them working between it. There are those who are underemployed, which is quite sad. There's no issues with that, and I don't think if people are living to their means, then they can still pay all the bills if they're budgeting and doing those normal things. It doesn't matter what income they're coming from. The problem is if they don't have the income, and that's where the problem comes, where you've got people who are part-time, not by choice, but by the way the economy is. I think that's missing in a lot of the media, and that's very sad. I have a lovely couple who've been client for a long, long time. They have quite a low income. They've raised a family of 3. They have, they own their own home. They go on an overseas holiday every year. Their textbook as far as them sitting down, having the proverbial family meeting at the end of the week, paying all the bills, and I mean, they're living a great lifestyle. I've got some people who are earning 300,000, 250, 300, who effectively can't pay any bills because suddenly, if the income stops, their fall is higher than a person who's on a $30,000 income, but the feeling is exactly the same. So it's a part in the media that's not taken up. So if you talk about the increase in prices in the eastern states, the reason people can afford to pay those prices is because most of them are employed. So it's a part of that process.
And how much of your role is actually helping people budget?
Unfortunately, it's becoming more common.
More common.
More common than before. I mean, if we have, you get that way in the end. I have some regional offices where people do struggle a lot more than perhaps what they do here. But at the end of the day, if people really need to learn to budget, there's a number of things on the website. I have a girl in the office that is available to budget, which never used to happen before. And of course, obviously, if they're in dire straits, you may have heard the advertisements for My Budget. My Budget just does a wonderful job. But if you step back, why isn't budgeting being taught at school? Why aren't families sitting down and talking about budgeting, helping that next generation so that that need for budgeting, by the time you need budgeting, you're involved?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Does the accounting bodies have any influence? I mean, are they able to influence what schools schools are going to teach? I mean, are we at that stage where we should be pushing that a bit more?
Oh, look, at the end of the day as employers, we would love the bodies to spend more time, or the universities and TAFEs to actually take more time, because the students that they're churning out are really not work ready in any shape or form. And that's sad, because they've spent a long time doing their numbers, they've spent a lot of time, but they have no soft skill, and very few of them actually been out in the workforce, and unfortunately it makes it very, very difficult. In any industry, that's the same thing. As anyone over 50 now, the main reason they retire or walk away from businesses is because they can't find good staff. But yeah, wonderfully accounting bodies did something like that. I know one of the universities looking into more soft skills, but they didn't do soft skills for accounting, but they're going to teach them how to have sex. I don't know. Universities, I don't think there's an issue with that. So where's the reasonableness? But I'd love that to happen.
Pauline, excuse another question, but how often do you find that some form of addiction to gambling or drugs is a problem that you're facing?
As accountants, we don't cross a line. And if we're aware of that, then the most we can do is to approach that delicately. But most of that is kept as an in-the-house family, and within the financial, where there's banks and that involved, well then of course we have, like every job, professional, whatever, there's that undercurrent of everyone knowing what's happening.
I'm not asking that you should counsel them. What I'm interested in is, do you find that how frequent it is that it's a gambling problem or an addiction that you're not able to enter into, but you know that that could be the basic issue?
Oh, that happens a lot, yeah, it is. And yet they'll sit there and say that, should be right, should be right. I'm going to have a current one at the moment who has got a head in the sand. We know exactly what it is, there's no problems at all. But unfortunately, it is happening more and more. But you tend not to acknowledge it, and unfortunately sometimes you step back and say, look, I just cannot help you, leave. And that's...
I just wonder how common a problem it will become. See, I'm forming a theory that the people who fall for scams are maybe basically gambling addicts.
No,
addicts.
no.
In other words, they can't resist a chance
No, they are your regular average Joe who picked up the phone at a moment in time, and you've got to remember they're doing all of these things all the time, and you think we all have a bad moment in time. If someone pushes your buttons at that moment, sometimes you'll do things you don't want to do, and that's what they work on. They work on the point of they'll ring someone at a moment of weakness and they'll change their mind. So no, it's more just your normal average jobs. Yeah.
I'm not quite sure how to phrase this. It appears as though your role is, as what you're doing, is receiving the end result of a lot of problems, more than instigating ways of solving the problems at the start. I'm not quite sure what I've said.
We have to do two things. We make a difference in people's lives by knowing what's happening in their lives. We can only be of help to them if they will share what is happening in their lives. Then we can make a difference. So we cannot solve a problem until we know there's a problem. So if we can identify a problem, we can solve the problem. And that's what I love about accounting. We can solve a problem.
And you have a way of seeing what the problem is and instigating
Yes.
so that it doesn't come back to you again.
Yeah. And that's a part of, it's a part of any job. It's taking the person with whom you work or the client with whom you work and identifying how to interact with them to get that information from them. Any other questions?
Do you know the percentage of casual workers in this area compared to permanents?
The statistics that came out, I only had a quick look at the budget stuff. That's just not budget stuff. The Bureau of Statistics, that diabolical last August. It makes interesting reading, but the suggestion is that we're in a bit of bother in South Australia. So if you're at the other side of 30 and you have the opportunity, get to the eastern states while you can so that you don't get too entrenched here. when I get too old and I get cold in the night, I will just hang a note on the door, headed north, and I'll be in Queensland. Why would you stay in South Australia in the middle of July and August unless you had to?
Last question.
So that's accounting. It's a profession that if you have, I guess, in a nutshell, if you have friends or relatives who are thinking about going into accounting, don't discount it. It's a really, really good profession. It's not just numbers, it's about people. We've seen the number of different accounting professions that there are. So you can see that it fits any kind of personality. So, yeah, we do need more people in the profession.
Pauline, thank you so much. I'll ask Jenny to propose a vote of thanks for your very interesting talk. Come over closer, please.
See that? And you got the left.
I got you. I know. I got you. I got you.
On behalf of all of us tonight, we would like to thank you for coming out on such an old wintry kind of night to come and talk to us about this. I'm still dying to know about those stilettos, and I'd also like to know about the man who lives next door to his wife, and I'm wondering whether he can claim things. But in the meantime, here's a few bicycle things for you, and we'd like you to accept them on our behalf. And thank you very, very much for coming on tonight, and to teaching us all about accountancy and auditing.
I do thank you very much. And I hope that we won't be so scary anymore. This is lunch for the next week.
And the week after.
Yeah.
Thank you.